We now switch speakers, or writers. We go from James the Just in Jerusalem to Lucius Annaeus Seneca, who writes from Rome. Seneca lately arrived in Rome to Novatus, my brother in Cordoba, this 17th year of the reign of Tiberius. Greetings. You know that I pray ceaselessly for your health and for nothing more than the healing of this grim suspirium which we have shared, you and I, all the days of our lives. But with this letter, mi novati, I am able to send more than desires and devotion. I have a fact at hand, a thing you can do to salubrious effort. Go to Egypt. Live in Egypt. Breathe Egypt for the space of half a year, and your lungs will know the benefit. My own breathing improved remarkably while I was visiting our aunt and our uncle Galerius in Alexandria, and though I have only just now returned to Rome, I believe the improvement is real and will last. In Alexandria, they call our condition by its Greek name, asthma, a panting. A shortness of breath indeed. The Latin suspirium is less effete and more functional. But you and I both know that the best, most descriptive term of all is hoc animum egerere. It is a continual breathing one's last, is it not? Oh, mi novati, how close to dying we have come. While we suffer, it is again and again almost to give up the ghost. No matter how brief the attack, it comes like a squall at sea, and I, by violent efforts, produce a mere squeaking sound. Wonder in the silence of my mind whether the breath that just fled me will ever return. Shall it have been my last breath after all? Novatus, do you, in that last blackening moment, do the same as I? Do you make a meditation on death, a practicing to die, as it were? Well, abide in Egypt a while, my brother. Drink the dry air. Astonish yourself with the freedom of deep breathing when your lungs shall be like leaves on the pine tree, causing soft sighs. Go to Egypt, but not immediately. Don't go now. The emperor has roused himself to clean house. The emperor is furiously sacking officials in every province under his direct control. The emperor is suddenly as predictable as a babbling Jewish magician. Wait till he withdraws again into his usual reclusion and then go. It's this business with Sejanus that has drawn the great beast from his lavish lair on Capri. I don't mean that Tiberius has actually come to Rome, but that he is suddenly exerting a bloody influence here, executing Sejanus through the actions of the Senate and striving thereby to resurrect his own power. I doubt it was the horrors that the Praetorian prefect imposed on Rome that troubled Tiberius, capable of horrors of his own. Rather, it was the golden statues of Sejanus. It was the impolitic pride with which Sejanus allowed his birthday to be declared a holiday. It was Sejanus' power more than the substance, the form thereof. Tiberius squashed power, yet in his poor, bedeviled brains, the execution of Sejanus has not been enough. The emperor, now a perfect hive of suspicions, is changing policy. Once he trusted his provincial governors as he would his own right hand. Once he let them hold office for decades, creating a blessed consistency abroad. Now he makes a dogma of distrust and recalls them all for no reason at all. And that's the command that ended my sojourn in Egypt. Wasn't it 16 years ago that Tiberius appointed Uncle Galerius to govern it? Almost half my life. And though the rest of that province is a miserable backwater, I'd come to love the learning in Alexandria and would have stayed a decade in philosophic meditations. Who could have anticipated the violent changes to come? Not only that we had to hasten from Egypt, but also that we had truly to face and outface death on the way. Mi Donati, here is the principal news of this letter. I've been avoiding the words. Heavily now I lift my reed to write them. Uncle Galerius is dead. His wife, on the other hand, his widow, I should say, our aunt, has emerged from the event as a she-eagle of noble and stubborn strength. When we meet again, I'll give you a fuller account of the experience. Here and now, in the immediate grieving of my heart, I can but sketch the story of his dying thus. The emperor's recall was both sudden and impatient. Within a fortnight, then, we took passage on a grain ship out of the port of Alexandria. We promised both captain and crew a handsome payment at the end of the voyage. A generous tent, therefore, was erected on the deck of the vessel for our privacy and comfort. Interior couches and tables were fixed to the floor. Closets and boxes and games and carpets furnished the small apartment. And to console my troubled uncle, there were, beside his wife, an Egyptian cook, a musician who blew a soft pipe, and his affectionate nephew. I spent a good deal of time reading aloud to our aunt and uncle, especially the writings of Papirius Fabianus. But then, 5 days into the voyage, a squall struck down on us so suddenly that the rigging snapped and we wallowed, broadside into the wind. The tent gulped and bellied inward, straining its ropes. I heard the shouts of the sailors outside. I told my uncle to bind his wife and himself to one of the couches. Then I went out into the weather. The deck was awash. The water foamed and tore at my ankles. 2 men were fighting with the tangled rigging amidships. 3 others strove to cut the sail that they could not lower. The captain cried me back into the tent, and I would have obeyed him. But at that minute, the whole ship heaved and listed to a violent angle. I lost footing. Equipment slid down the deck and into the sea. Sailors grabbed the tackle to save themselves. A spar swung wildly over my head. It slashed the wall of the tent. A shrieking arose on the wind, familiar anguish, even as the captain started yelling, "Mitiscapim!" Lower the boat. I crawled back to the collapsing tent. I drew myself through its fallen door and found our dear aunt lying across her husband on his couch. The side of his head was split open, bleeding. Her face was a ghastly map of his blood, but his eyes were open and fixed. The ship pitched. The spar wandered drunkenly over my uncle's skull. Everywhere the tent shivered and snapped. All things shifted. Nothing was stable. Nothing but those staring eyes and the wife that kept kissing his hands. I said, let him go, Materta. Come, Galerius is dead." She did not answer me. I said, "Matertera, they're lowering a boat. We have to escape in the boat. Come with me." I put my hands on her shoulders, but she shook me off. The Egyptian was cowering under the table, shrieking. Hers was the anguish I had heard. In that instant, she put a human face on the terrors. Matertera, I shouted. "There's no help for it. Leave him behind. Leave the body behind and save yourself." A strong knife ripped through the tent wall. The weather exploded around us. In the midst of that violence, the captain appeared and cried, "We're abandoning ship!" He reached and took my aunt's arm. "Woman," he shouted, "you first." And suddenly the woman had a voice. "No," she said, taking her arm back. "My husband goes first." The captain glanced at the stark eyes. "Madam, the man is dead." "Why should that matter to you?" she said. "It's a small boat. There isn't space for a dead man." "Then two shall die. Will that give you space enough?" "Madam, please, why would you save a dead man?" "For the dignity, sir," my aunt cried out, turning her full face toward the captain. The wind made whips of her hair. Her forehead streamed and rain and blood together. She cried, "A good man lost position. A good man lost his life. He shall not lose his soul to the sea. He shall be rightly buried." The captain searched my eyes with a panicked appeal. "Sir, will you tell her the need?" Novatus, my brother, the bravado of our aunt caused me to astonish myself. For I raised my voice and bellowed above the wind, "If this ship survives with the body and the wife of Galerius, we'll double the reward to all hands equally. If not, then nothing, nothing." I roared to all hands, "You might as well all die now." The Egyptian cook passed out, but the sailors went straight to work. They jettisoned the weaponry, boxes, furniture, the tent, and every heavy object on the deck. They threw overboard not only the grain, but the clay containers as well. They released a sheet anchor from the bow of the ship in order to turn our nose into the wind, and they succeeded. Galerius rests in a marble tomb. The 9 days of mourning are past, and the days of obligation have begun. The grandeur of his funeral equaled indeed the accomplishments of his life, as well as the nobility of his wife. And now that wife, our aunt, has turned her strength of purpose onto the two of us, dear brother. We have become her present project. She begs me to beg you, Novatus, to travel hither to Rome. This newly garrulous woman wants to introduce us to her most influential friends. She says that we have languished too long outside the magistries of government. She's currying favor, sir, in order that we might finally be elected to the quaestorship, and so embark upon the public careers that shall raise us to the senatorial ranks that her husband never enjoyed. And why not? I might as well climb poorly, panting and practicing death, since I cannot swim at all. Thus ends the letter of Seneca.